You might think you know the Monkees, a bit of a joke band, right? You might have fond memories of watching the TV show. But the Monkees weren't just a fake TV band. They actually managed to pull the wool over everyone's eyes, and not just once. Today, we're looking at how the Monkees fooled the world. They began life as a fictional TV band, became the real thing, released some great songs, and even outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Or did they? The story starts in the mid-60s, when Beatlemania had exploded around the globe. The Beatles had tapped a new market with their animated TV show, using it to promote their band and their music to millions of people instantly. They were everywhere, on stage, on the radio, and TV. It was a great idea, and other people wanted to cash in on it too. TV producers Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider saw an opportunity and pitched a brand new kind of TV show, a sitcom about a band that was essentially an American version of the Beatles. So they put an ad out in the paper looking for people to audition. Surprisingly, over 400 people applied, and they turned up to audition for just 4 spots. Eventually, 4 young men were picked, more for their charm and their looks than their musical skills, although in fairness they did all have musical backgrounds. Out of the hundreds who auditioned, they picked Mickey Dolenz on drums, Davy Jones as the frontman, Peter Tork and Michael Nesmith. Mickey had been a child actor. Davy was the only British member and had played the Artful Dodger in the West End and on Broadway. Peter was a folk musician, and Mike was a singer-songwriter with a dry sense of humour and a knack for songwriting. Here's the thing though, none of them actually knew each other. They weren't a real band. Some didn't even really play instruments properly. Pete and Michael were the most accomplished musicians, and while Mickey had some musical ability, he actually had to learn the drums to play this role, which is quite impressive, to be honest. Not everyone can play drums, but it didn't matter. They had great chemistry and charisma. The show was funny, and the people making it had a plan. The show premiered on ABC in September 1966, and it was completely new, something audiences hadn't really seen before. It made use of fast cuts and slapstick comedy, and more than anything, it was just something novel. The audience loved it, or at least its target audience of teenagers did. Older audiences weren't exactly sold on the mophead musicians. It also didn't really have a fixed plot. The show was more a vehicle for the jokes and the music. But while the band sang and acted on screen, they weren't actually playing their instruments on the accompanying records. The music was made by studio pros, the famous Wrecking Crew, with the Monkees just providing the vocals. And that fact didn't sit well with some music fans and critics. The band was branded a manufactured or fake group, a sort of puppet act, especially by fans of authentic bands of the time. But I don't really know what people were expecting. It was a TV show, a sitcom. Were they supposed to be the actual Beatles? But it was true. The first 2 albums weren't written by the Monkees themselves. I guess this is where you could say they first fooled the world, even though it wasn't really their own intention. In the 2 and a bit years the show ran, the Monkees released 2 full studio albums and a handful of singles. And they were massive, huge. 1966's The Monkees was a #1 album for 13 weeks and featured the #1 hit, Last Train to Clarksville. The 1967 album, More of the Monkees, was an even bigger chart topper, #1 for 18 weeks. This one included the track I'm a Believer, written by Neil Diamond.
Then I saw her face, now I'm a believer.
And this is why I say they fooled the world. Because those 2 albums were almost completely written, composed and recorded by the Wrecking Crew and various other studio musicians. They'd then get the boys in to just sing the lyrics and play the songs on set, on the TV show. The Monkees had 2 world-famous albums, but they didn't. Not really, anyway. But the band members did have musical talent and ambitions beyond TV novelty. Mike Nesmith, in particular, was a talented songwriter with roots in folk and country. Peter Tork was a trained musician who could play guitar, keyboards, and bass. Mickey Dolenz was by now a capable drummer and singer. And Davy Jones was a solid frontman and actor. The boys were writing their own music, but it wasn't being accepted as Monkees songs. And so began the push for artistic control. Frustrated with being sidelined, the band fought to play on their own records and have their own material included. And the turning point was the album Headquarters in 1967, when the band took full creative charge, playing instruments, selecting songs, and producing themselves. They kicked out producer Don Kirshner, who had been running the show behind the scenes. That album marked the moment the Monkees truly became a band, not just actors playing one. Critics and fans heard the difference immediately. Headquarters went to number 1 and stayed for 10 weeks, and this time it really was the Monkees. It featured songs written by all 4 members and showed them as the musicians they really were. There was grit and soul beneath the pop. As Mickey Dolenz later said, it was like Pinocchio became a real boy. Then, in 1967, they released one of their biggest ever singles, Daydream Believer.
Cheer up, sleepy Jean. Oh, what can it mean?
They were now well and truly on their way. But even in the past, they'd shown a sneaky side. Take Last Train to Clarksville, for example. On the surface, it seems to be an upbeat pop song about a guy rushing to catch a train. But underneath, the lyrics carry a secret meaning. It's actually about a soldier leaving for war, and with the Vietnam War raging, those kinds of references had to slip past radio censors carefully. The song's undertone got through because it sounded innocent enough on the surface. And that was the Monkees' style. Catchy, poppy, but with hidden depth. They charmed their way past the censors without them even knowing, fooling us again. It might not have been written by them, but it is the sort of thing they would carry forward. A decade later, and here's where it gets really wild. In 1977, Mike Nesmith gave an interview on an Australian radio station and dropped a bombshell. He said that the Monkees had sold more records that year than the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined. No one believed it, but Nesmith insisted it was true, and the claim took on a life of its own. Newspapers reported it, fans quoted it, it became part of Monkees lore, except it wasn't true. It turns out Nesmith was pulling a fast one, a cheeky joke that spiraled out of control. The myth stuck for decades. That moment really sums up the Monkees' entire story, really. A series of clever, surprising moments where they fooled the world. First, TV viewers thought they were watching a genuine rock band. Then the music industry doubted their legitimacy until they proved it. They got past censors with coded lyrics, and finally, they pulled off a publicity stunt that convinced millions they'd outsold the biggest bands ever. None of it would have worked without the band members' real talent, and their willingness to fight for control of their own music. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. Producer Don Kirshner fought tooth and nail to keep control, and there were plenty of tensions behind the scenes. But when the band finally took the reins, it paid off. One of their biggest gambles was the movie Head, released in 1968, directed by Rafelson and co-written by Jack Nicholson. Now, this film was a bizarre, psychedelic trip. It had no clear plot and was full of weird imagery. It mocked TV pop culture, consumerism, and even their own fan base. The movie flopped at the box office, confusing both fans and critics. But it was a bold statement. They were willing to try anything. It's almost like it was meant to destroy their image as teen idols. Unfortunately, the TV show wrapped up around the same time, and the band's popularity faded, and the lads just drifted apart. But the story doesn't end there. The Monkees reunited over the years for tours and albums, proving that they were more than just a TV joke. Each member went on to have quite interesting careers. Nesmith was a pioneer of music videos, helping launch what would become MTV. Dolenz became a voice actor and producer. Torque kept playing folk and rock gigs, and Jones pursued acting and theatre until his passing in 2012. And this whole story reminds me of The Knack. You know, the band that did My Sharona. They were criticised for being manufactured as well. If you ever wondered what happened to that band, well, I've got a great video on it over here.